Welcome back. And of course, we're talking labor, federal government disputes over wage, and the negotiation continues based on that resolution reached 2 days ago. They said they'll be meeting every day for 1 week to come up with something that will excite organized labor. Well, labor is saying we haven't suspended our strike, we only relaxed that. They will explain what all of that means. But we're being joined in the program right now by a senior economist and from SPM Professionals, Mr. Paul Alaje. Mr. Alaje, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so very much for having me.
As always, you know, when it comes to these issues, we drag you in to come and provide perspective as much as possible. So the natural place to start on this particular one, Mr. Alaje, is what you make of the back and forth between labor. Now, labor say they have relaxed the strike. Federal government say, we're going to do better than 60,000 naira. Everybody's looking for a way out of this impasse, some sort of a middle ground. But from an economist's point of view, what do you see?
Well, on the 29th of May, 2023, the president has hit a ball. An economy is like a snooker board. When you hit on that white ball, you want to pot either blue or red, depending on the team you are. What is important is before the end of the game, don't pot the black ball. He has pot a ball to increase government revenue by removing subsidy. That's the action of hitting that ball will affect other balls. All other balls cannot remain the same. That is the rule in playing snookers. So what are the other balls that have been affected? There has been increase in cost of living. Inflation has gone sporadically high, now at 33.69%, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. We have also seen other things have been affected, even to the point of the cost of energy. We have also seen that on the 15th of June 2023, exchange rates had been floated. In fact, the central bank called it flotation of exchange rates. And because of these two actions, which means playing on a snooker board, so many other boards have adjusted, have changed in position. The question is, how soon can we bring compensation? And in bringing compensation, are we sure that we will not shut down our economy? There comes your question. What is the average? What should be done? The first is, like the last time I had this conversation with you, I took you the memory lane, and we agreed that the average minimum wage, especially for new government, has been around $100 to $150 per month. What does that mean in today's figure? If government says it wants to pay $100 equivalent per month, what it means is that we'll be looking at an average of we'll be looking at about, if you want to pay 100K, we'll be looking at $2.2 to $2.3 for labor per day. If you multiply that by 30, we arrive at some figures, which is still not up to the amount we think it may be up to what government should pay. But generally speaking, my advice would be that if we must pay minimum wage in Nigeria of today, with the given current economic realities, with the given high cost of living, I think what we should be looking at for both labor and government will be to be talking around 100,000 and between 100,000 to 150,000. I understand that government don't have this money. I understand that this will also affect the private sector. But paying less than 100,000 as minimum wage will be that we want to compensate people in poverty. And I will tell you this, for someone to live below poverty line, such person must earn or spend less than $1.95, approximately $2. If you use today's exchange rate, maybe 1,450, but comfortably 1,500. 1,500, that's in Naira, times 30. Then you see what that will come to. It will come to about 90,000 naira at the end of the month. That is, you multiply that by 2, multiply that by 30, then you see, multiply that by 1,500. You have about 90,000 naira. That is for people to barely escape poverty bracket. But we are not going to pay anybody just because we want them to be around the corridor of poverty. There must be a buffer that should be provided. And that is why 100, 120, 150 will be a reasonable place to be because of state. Because let me tell you this, when this money is paid, it's going to generate, you know, it's another snooker board. You want to also eat another ball. There are other balls that will be affected. And it's important for us to know what we're about to do. If we don't pay increased minimum wage, people are already poor. People are earning below poverty line, which can make other nations to even laugh at us as a nation, which is not really good for us, for the image of our country. But when we take this decision, there are other things that will happen. One, we're going to see increase in inflation. In the next 2, 3, 4 months, we're going to see inflation figure go up. How do we manage inflation when we already have high NPR? The central bank will come and through Monetary Policy Committee to say that we have a mandate to combat inflation. Already, we've continued to increase NPR by MPC so that we can bring down inflation. So increasing minimum wage, even with the recent announcement when it's paid, is going to push up inflation. The central bank may say they want to further tighten. When they tighten, it means we're trying to adjust money supply. The question is, adjusting money supply will necessitate contraction in the economy. If it is persistent, it may lead to a contraction. And when that contraction persists for a long time, 2, 3, 4 quarters, and there are no productivity, please underline my word, productivity, to compensate with the current increase in money supply, unfortunately, Nigeria may go into a recession. Don't believe me? Study what South Africa experienced between 2001 to 2003. Continuous increase in exchange rate because of increase in money supply. Continuous increase in monetary policy rate because of increase in money supply took South Africa into a recession. South Africa is another African country, but of course they are partially out, even though the growth rate is still very small. And again, when you look at the inconsistent increase in NPR, it's not just about this administration, even the previous administration. Towards the end of the previous administration, you have seen NPR stood at 14%, which was the highest in recent history. Now, we even have more than all of the things that we saw from the previous administration. What happens to growth? Growth averaged about 2.5 to 2%. What happens to growth today is still less than 3%. But what happens to population growth rate? Population growth rate is between 2.67% to 3%. Are we really growing at all? The answer is no. So on one decision, whenever we increase the minimum wage, which I'm recommending, should never be less than 100,000. But it does not mean that it will suddenly end in good news all of a sudden. It will have necessary implication. One of them is inflation. If Monetary Policy Authority does not converge with the fiscal authority, then definitely you would have increase in NPR, which if it persists for a long time, you might see a recession coming to Nigeria. Perhaps maybe next year, maybe later this year, until we check in our lab to check the econometrics, the numbers, then we can tell you around which quarter this may happen.
Mr. Alaje, let's take advantage of your understanding of how these things work and begin to go back to some of the things we've done. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we have to do some rethinking. For a developing economy like ours, now we're fourth largest, we're no longer the biggest economy by the numbers, less than 300 billion in terms of value of our GDP. Privatizing assets, liberalizing markets in a bid to taper inflation doesn't really work for developing economy. That's what brought us here.
Well, when we say we privatize assets and we liberalize, for developing economy, it does not really work. And it does not mean that it cannot work. It does not really work because of method. I give you an example of where privatization and liberalization has worked. Look at telco. It has worked in that sector. But when you look at energy, and when you look at telco, again, economics does not assume that you are going to have a regional monopoly of some sort. So, but when you look at energy, what we have is regional monopoly. If I don't want to use AEDC in Abuja, which other electric company can I use? In Lagos, on the mainland, if I don't want to use Ikeja Electric, which other one? Where do I go to? If I don't want to use Eko Electric on the mainland, where do I go to? So I am stocked with some inefficient distribution companies in these areas. Meanwhile, I am supposed to have option. If truly you want to call it privatization, the essence of privatization is to ensure increase in competition and efficiency. But the first leg of this is even competition. It's not there. So how do you now get efficiency when nobody is competing with such organizations? So when we look at policy, it's important we think them through. and not just think that, oh, this is what the textbook says. Beyond the textbook, what is the mind? What is on the mind of those authors? What is on the mind of the people in literature? What do they intend to achieve before they come up with such model that we are trying to copy or we are trying to emulate? Because if we don't follow it squarely and the way it should be done, it will end up hurting us. So we have some good things we have done in terms of privatization. But unfortunately, if we don't do them right, they will come back hurting us.